What is up, guys, and welcome to another episode of Guarani Vision, the first ever podcast dedicated to Paraguayan football in English. As always, I'm Roberto Rojas, and joining me are my two great co-hosts, Fede Perez and Ralph Hannah. And guys, we're getting straight into this new month. It's been a while since all three of us have come in together here at Guarani Vision, but nevertheless, we are really inside the action of Paraguayan football, not just only from domestic levels, but also international levels, seeing what's going on in the Copa Libertadores and the Sudamericana. We also got some information coming out from the women's game, a really interested group that's going to happen in a competition that will be happening in a couple of months. Obviously, some players abroad that are also performing to the extent. I mean, there are some things that are going on outside of it, but we won't talk about that. We'll talk about what's been going on with the Paraguayan teams in general. So let's go straight into it. Let's go to someone who I'm sure had a really good vacation, but is back to work being with us. So Fede Perez, how are you, man?
Short vacations, but I'm back. Hi, Roberto. Hi, Ralph. Hi to everybody from Guarani Vision. Yeah, just a couple of 10 days, I think it was, that I had off, but I'm back in action. Missed a couple of games. Obviously, the first Super Clásico in Libertadores, which I think I didn't miss much because that was kind of a boring match. It was a 0-0 draw, and we were expecting a lot more. The fans were expecting a lot more out of that match, but Libertadores is heating up with other games that are being played also, and we have to look at the local league just because Libertad is kind of taking a leap, I would say, just having more and more space between the first and the other places. The other teams are not keeping it up with Libertad, and Libertad is taking advantage of this, and Libertad has the roster to do it. We said it before, they're changing it up. It's about that time of the year where a lot of the coaches have to use different players. They have to use the depth of their roster, and not all teams here in Paraguay really have that. But yeah, it's getting good. We have very important games ahead of us. I think next weekend we have a Cerro Porteño Libertad coming up, so that's going to be really interesting. This next weekend we have games pretty much all week in what is kind of an off week here in Paraguay. Roberto, you guys, I think in the States have a spring break. I think that was a couple of weeks ago, actually. And we have this week, we have Semana Santa here, which is a typical week to gather the family around, to eat our typical foods. Also, I'm smelling some chipa around here already, some beju. So I'm getting my stomach and my hands ready for some good food. Yeah, watching a lot of games. That's what we got going on this weekend. I'm happy to be back, Roberto.
It's good to hear you as well, but also heating up here are the playoffs. Your Miami Heat are doing well. They're going to be in the first seed in the NBA playoffs. Obviously, for my Celtics, they got to take on the Brooklyn Nets. A tough series. They just won actually against the Cavs in the play-in. So
we might see each other. We might see each other.
Hey, I hope so. I definitely want that type of series. So yeah, but switching gears back to the football soccer. Yeah, it's really been interesting to see what's been going on, and I'll introduce Ralph here because I think from what we saw in the league, I think we're seeing really a race heat up. I think we're starting to see maybe a sort of divide happening. I mean, it's too early to tell, but it's still starting to feel that way. But for the Paraguayan teams in those competitions in the Libertadores and the Sudamericana, it's actually been decent, to say the least. It hasn't been the best performances, and then we'll get to that in a bit for some of the games that we've already seen. But so far, at least from what we've seen, it's been pretty decent, I would say.
Yeah, we're starting to see, well, in the local league first, we're starting to see those teams that have the double competition maybe struggling a bit, trying to balance the teams, balance their teams who plays, except for Libertad, who, as Fede mentioned, have such a strong roster. But we're seeing Olympia, they had a few players get injured they had Ivan Torres was injured in the warm-up in their last league game. You have Cerro kind of, well, they've got two strikers out injured, and they've been trying to find the goals, which we'll talk about. They did manage to find them tonight, but then you have people like maybe General Caballero have got bigger fish to fry now in the Sudamericana, so that kind of idea of playing their full strength team in the league we might not see very often, and the same will go maybe for Guarani, who are playing Sudamericana as well. So as that's happening, the teams will shape up, because for them the focus, I think, for all the teams is always the continental competition, because the way Paraguayan football is set up is you've got the Clausura, now it's the Apertura, but we've got the Clausura as well, so we've got time to make things up in the league. let's go all out and in these early stages in continental competition and see how far we can go. So that's kind of what we're starting to see. The strongest side is always going in these games, these Copa Libertadores or Copa Sudamericana games.
Absolutely. And heading into the Copa Libertadores, we're going to talk within that discussion first, going on with now the new leader of the group, Cerro Porteño. Obviously, when we did our previews of the group, they are in a group with Colón of Argentina, Peñarol of Uruguay, and their bitter rivals, Olimpia. If you remember in the first game, Olimpia and Cerro Porteño drew in a 0-0 stalemate. It was a really, really rigged match, I would say. We mentioned it in the last shows, but I think the performance that both teams had, meaning they had to go into their next game with the obligation to get maximum points, especially for Cerro, who are now going to be playing their second game. Technically, obviously, they were away in the first one, but nevertheless, they're playing their third. They're going to play their the 3 games at home in Asunción. They played their second game today against Colón of Santa Fe, where Colón actually took the lead early on over there at La Olla. Eric Mesa scoring early on the 31st minute, but then it switched gears for the youngster Fernando Romero to step in at a crucial time, of course, because one of the players that was supposed to be one of the stars for the Cerro side, Marcelo Moreno Martins, was not in the squad, unfortunately, due to the death of his father, which obviously we send our condolences to the family of Marcelo Moreno Martins. Therefore, he had to travel back to Bolivia. And that means that someone needed to step up, and Fernando Romero came in, the 21-year-old youngster, a player that has always been over there in the league. He really hasn't been given the chance to shine, and now he comes in Chiqui Arce's size and scores a brace against Colón de Santa Fe. Alberto Espinola getting the goal in the 70th minute to get all 3 points and a 3-1 win for Cerro Porteño. Fede, you were at the game. You were calling it for Rock and Pop at La Nueva Olla. What are your impressions of this? And more so than not, I mean, obviously now it's the second game. They still have a couple games left to really get themselves in good position. But I think this was a crucial win for Cerro Porteño, especially after the performance that they were doing in the league. But it did show, like you said, the differences of now trying to manage both competitions with the squad that they have.
Yeah, we always say, right, that in Libertadores, you need to step it up, especially on the pace, going up against teams from Brazil, from Argentina. These are the fastest teams. These are the teams that really get ready for the Libertadores. And Colón, on the first game, they beat pretty easily Peñarol. And, I was kind of respecting this team. In the preview, I thought that Cerro Porteño was going to have some sort of trouble because of some certain players that Colón had. And it was just like that in the first half. I mean, Cerro really had problems. Colón got the first goal, and then you were waiting for that reaction from Cerro Porteño just to see what they're really made from. And this match was special for the forwards. I mean, Cerro had their defense back because Daniel Rivas has been back for these last 2 games. Their left back, so they pretty much got their defense just as Chiqui Arce, their coach, likes it. They had their midfield. They weren't missing anybody there, but they were missing their forwards. Robert Morales got injured. He's out pretty much for the rest of the year. And then this situation that you were mentioning about Marcelo Moreno Martins being out, we don't know how long it's going to take for him to come back to the roster, to come back to the team. And meanwhile, Cerro Porteño has games pretty much every 3 days, and they were taking special care of him. He didn't play pretty much the other day against General Caballero. He was going to start in this game, and he wasn't available, so he had to improvise. He had to go with Sergio Diaz. He had to go with Fernando Romero. Thankfully, Fernando Romero had been playing these last couple of games, so he was kind of getting into the rhythm, but he needed to score. And he got a brace. He got 2 goals in this game. One was a header, and the first one was very important because it came on a crucial moment, 40 minutes in the first half, and he really showed up. And I think Sergio Diaz also had a good game, and I love what Claudio Aquino brought to the team in certain moments, kind of taking over, putting the special passes that he always gives to the rest of his teammates. And I saw the Cerro Porteño that I'm accustomed to seeing. the Cerro Porteño that's aggressive, the Cerro Porteño that likes to touch the ball around the field, and the team that has the possession. And I saw that team in the second half, an aggressive team, and Colón just had nothing to do on the pitch when Cerro Porteño was concentrated and doing what they've done in these last couple of years. I mean, this is the Cerro Porteño that I want to see, the one that I saw in the second half. And it was very important to touch on Dani Rivas, because Alan Rodriguez came in for him, and he put the assist on that second goal for Cerro Porteño. And after it was turned around, after Cerro Porteño turned the score around, Colón had nothing to do on the pitch. I say that again, just because Cerro Porteño was dominant, and I think a 3-1 was good, was a good result, but especially for Cerro Porteño to bounce back. I hadn't seen this identity in Cerro Porteño in the last games. I don't think they were feeling themselves. I do think that losing at home against Olimpia in that league match was kind of hard for the team, and they needed to bounce. They needed to bounce from that, and this was the game. They couldn't do it against Olimpia in that first game against them in Libertadores. It was a very boring, in my eyes, 0-0. Not much to take from that game for either team. But from this game, I do think Cerro Porteño is going to learn a lot. And they even had a lot of youngsters due to this situation, because they were missing so many forwards that, a lot of young players that we pretty much haven't seen were sitting there besides Chiqui Arce waiting for their chance. So it was a positive game for Cerro Porteño, mainly because of the result, but just because they look like themselves again, Ralph.
Yeah, and the real standout point is, I think, some of that aggressiveness you talked about, or the mental side of it from Cerro, because they remember their last 8 games, they've kept 7 clean sheets. The only time they let in a goal was the game against Olimpia, which they lost, the Clásico in the local league. So when they went behind, I was concerned for them, because that obviously wasn't the game plan that suited Colón really well. Colón nearly made it 2-0 very quickly, right? I think I can't remember the player, but he tried to chip Jean. Maybe he should have shot lower or harder. So at that point, they were rocking a bit. They needed to kind of steady themselves and get back into their rhythm, their game plan. They had a very clear game plan. I was seeing that they were using the fullbacks a lot, Beto Espinola and Rivas, to really try and attack down the flanks, whereas Colón were trying to work through the middle. Funny enough, the first goal comes more from a kind of ball over the top in the middle, and Sergio Diaz, like you said, who's also playing very well, managed to capitalize on the error. There was a bit of an error by the central defender, and got the shot away. Rebound falls to Romero, who's there. That's, of course, testament to Chiqui Arce's system, that he always likes to play with 2 forwards. So if you have one player taking the shot, you're always going to have someone on hand for the rebound. But for Romero, this is really good. I mean, he's the first Cerro Porteño player to score 2 goals in the Libertadores since Nelson Aido, when he scored that double against Zamora a long time ago now, like 3-4 years back. And for Cerro to score 3 goals in the Libertadores is actually very rare for them as well. The last time was against Atlético Mineiro when they won the 4-1. So they've gone like 19 games. They haven't scored this many goals. So really positive night all round. And so we're talking about that kind of the mental side of things, and those players coming into the fold. And one player that maybe we'll see him in the local league now, he got on at the very end, is this kid, Isaias Cavilan, who's been doing really well in the reserves. He's a twin, so people like to think of the Romero twins that came through Cerro. He's got a twin called Tobias. But he came on and he got a really good breakaway, but I think it fell apart because of Enzo Jimenez. But watch out for people like him, because now Cerro, well, let's see what they do, because actually they need a strong team to play against Libertad at the weekend. But Arce really has to see how he's going to rotate to keep some of these players fresh. Fede mentioned Claudio Aquino had a really good game today. Not so much the last game in the local league. He had a really good game today. He's played the most minutes of any player in Cerro Porteño this year. So he needs a rest at some point as well. I saw Pica Lucena, I thought towards the end of the game, was getting a bit tired with some of his decision-making, his tackling off the ball. So they are getting tired. So that's definitely the thing to look out for. But on the whole tonight, very positive from Cerro.
Absolutely. I think it's an obvious good result. And now they have to prepare right now for this game against Peñarol obviously playing at home as well, and really, going into this game, I think it comes at a crucial point where, you know, uh, you come in and you think, okay, they are in a good position to qualify if they're able to get the win over there. And now, considering they've already beaten a team like Colón, where they have to play in their next game, but I mean, going to you on this one, you could say that, obviously it all depends on the other results, but Cerro can really get qualification wrapped up pretty well if results go their way very quickly.
I think obviously, just as Olimpia also wants to do, Cerro Porteño wants to make it to that last game against each other. That last super clásico. Even though Cerro Porteño is going to have the home advantage, but they both want to get qualified to that last game. They don't want to depend on that last super clásico, obviously. And it's very important that Cerro Porteño, that you were mentioning, they're playing all their games here in Asunción. They're playing the first game against Olimpia and Defensores de Chaco. They played at home against Colón. Now they play again next week at home against Peñarol. But yeah, these are games where players are running for their lives. The rhythm is totally different, and these are very tough matches for some of these guys also. So they need to be on their top game, but they need to be 100%. Also, I think Beto Espinola also left this game a bit injured. He was kind of, he had a couple of bumps, so we'll see if he can play against Libertad. Chiqui Arce has replacements for those kind of spots. He doesn't have that many replacements now for the forwards because of what happened with Marcelo Moreno Martins, Robert Morales, and also Alfio Oviedo, the opportunities he had, he also took advantage of them. So the players that we thought were on third, fourth, maybe even fifth place now are taking a starting role in this team, and they need to show up, and they need to show that they are made to be in a team like Cerro Porteño, and that they can leave something for this team in Libertadores. I think this was a very important win. They're first now, obviously go against Peñarol next week, but this kind of gives them some sort of space for error in the next game. I think that's very important, especially because the results weren't coming along in these last games. But overall, I'm happy to see Cerro Porteño coming back, taking a couple steps back and looking like themselves again, because you can't expect for Cerro Porteño to evolve in this moment of the year, to change it all up. I don't think, even though they're missing a couple of players, they're going to change their style of football. They need to get back to that. And I love what I saw against this Colón side on the second half. Colón was looking great before this game, and I think Cerro Porteño put them on their place.
They definitely did, but they definitely did. And now, looking at what's been going on over the weekend, switching gears now to the local league, obviously, I think we are seeing really a race of, hopefully not separation, but the way that it looks, it could indeed feel that way because of the effects that teams are having in the Copa Libertadores. Obviously, we saw on the weekend the two big teams of Paraguay drop points. We saw Olimpia losing 2-1 to Nacional on Saturday, and then followed by a 0-0 stalemate against a General Caballero de Juan León Mallorquín. Surprise side from the first, obviously from the second division coming into the first division, 0-0 against them over there in the in Alto Paraná. We saw a lot of Cerro fans go up there and try to make their statement, but unfortunately it did not change much because of an alternative team for Cerro, which means that with Libertad, they are still the only team to have not lost a single game so far, and they're continuing their unbeaten streak. A 3-1 win over Sol de America. Obviously, we saw goals from this game from Tito Villalba, the former Atlanta United player. Willy Mendieta, obviously, assisted also from Roque Santa Cruz. So it was a really big night for Willy Mendieta. 2 assists and 1 goal. But everyone was looking at what happened in the last goal from Julio Enciso, the first player to hit double digits so far this year. 10 goals to his game in 9 games. I mean, Ralph, we're seeing news coming about of all the teams that are interested in him. We saw the news of teams like Atalanta of Serie A. We saw Nice. We see even the Red Bull group, which consists of the team in Brazil, the one in New York, and the one at Leipzig in the Bundesliga. I mean, this kid is going to eventually leave, and rightly so. He's impressing in all instances here in Paraguay.
Yeah, the sky's the limit. I mean, looking back, you get a lot of players that come through and look very good in the local league, and you think they can go on to Europe, and then some let you down. Like the really most hyped players that I remember is Sergio Diaz, who ended going to Real Madrid, and Juan Iturbe, who was kind of called the Guarani Messi at the time, and all this kind of stuff. And they didn't eventually kick on. But the thing about Julio Enciso is he's doing more than they did at that stage. His end product is so much more. I mean, I can't remember a player that has scored of his age that scored 10 goals in such a short space of time. I was looking back, Derlis Gonzalez, when he was like 19, 20, and he come back from Benfica to Paraguay, I think he managed to get into double figures in the whole year, but not like in such a short space of time.
Yeah, not at this point. I mean, I think it's really for us, and Fede, obviously you're there as well. You've seen all the bright young talents growing up in Paraguay. I mean, I think we're starting to see the effects and the attention on the youngster. I think since the likes of Roque Santa Cruz. I mean, that's really the only player that managed to build up to the hype at such a young age, and Ciso is doing that.
Yeah. No, I'm agreeing with that. I mean, I was trying to rack my brains of other players, but I think what he's really bringing to the game at the moment is the goals, like the end product, but also that kind of mental attitude that he has. He often looks very kind of frustrated, right? When things aren't going his way, or he's getting fouled a lot, which you can imagine is going to happen because he's just on another level to most of the other players in that league. But he always seems to bounce back from it. This particular game where he scored, he hadn't gone to La Paz. He didn't go to the game against the strongest. Libertad said he had, like, I guess it's like a muscle strain would be the word to use in English, but it kind of just sounded like they were just giving him a rest. But then you wondered, like, what's going to happen now that suddenly his rhythm's been cut short? But nothing of the sort. He's there again. He's scoring again. I mean, the kids on fire. And for Libertad, they haven't lost a game since October. So you could technically, they lost the semi-final to Olimpia, but that was on penalties, the Copa Paraguay last season. But since 24th of October, they lost to Nacional. Since then, they've won most of those games. They've drawn very few. This year, they've only drawn, I think, the Olimpia game, the 2-2, and then of course in La Paz, but in La Paz is at altitude, so they're looking really good, Libertad.
I have yet to see a defender stop this kid in the local league. I mean, he's taken over. He's becoming the most important player in the tournament, but Libertad is getting alternatives. I mean, they're not only depending on this kid, even though he is showing up pretty much in every game. And it's true what Ralph is saying. You see him kind of frustrated when he can't score, because I do think he's kind of obsessed with the fact of being the top scorer. I do think that he's kind of feeling this pressure of, hey, I'm scoring on every match. I have to do it again on the next one. And he kind of takes that challenge on every game, and the refs aren't really taking care of him either. I mean, he's getting a lot of hits on his ankles. You know, they're trying to catch him up there. Also, he's so fast. He's so unpredictable that, you know, a lot of the defenders here in the Paraguayan league really have problems against him, and sometimes they hit him a little too much. He has to get used to that, because it's just part of the game, especially here in Paraguay. We kind of have that game style where the players that they have the ability, they usually they end up with a couple of bruises. But Julio Enciso is getting used to it. He's making the difference in Libertad. But hey, you got Tito Villalba scoring. You have William Mendieta coming in. I mean, everybody that comes in this team is kind of showing up. They had a problem in midfield with Hugo Martinez, who was just another great young talent that Libertad was showing us. And ever since his injury, a 39-year-old Christian Riveros came in the team, and he's been playing every 3 days. I mean, talk about a player that can do it. I mean, that's a player that went to Europe and that's just showing the way for everybody else. 39, almost 40 years old, and he played in La Paz, and then he came back to Asuncion and played this game for the local league also, and he's playing just every game, and yeah, he's not the only one doing it, but I wanted to mention him just because of his age. Roque Santa Cruz also, he's been playing. Maybe he hasn't scored as much as you would like or you were expecting from him, just because he is a top scorer. But he's getting a lot of game time. He's playing a lot more than Tacuara Cardoso, Oscar Cardoso as a starting nine, as a starting forward. And Libertad can mix it up, Roberto. I mean, they've had problems in defense, but hey, they lost Barbosa for a couple of games. They changed it up back there. They might not have so many players to change it up on the sides. They've had to improvise there with a couple of young players also, but they're first. Everybody needs to catch up to them, and I'm not seeing the same from the rest of the teams. I'm not seeing the same from Cerro Porteño now that they have to mix up their players way off from Olimpia, which is down there. They're not even close to the fight. Nacional is looking better now with a new coach, but they're not even close to the race. I mean, if we look at the table right now, if we look at the standings, I would say that Libertad is just on the trail, man. They're on their way to the championship. We have a very important game this weekend against Cerro Porteño. It might be the last chance to catch up to this team, especially because Cerro Porteño coming in after letting go of a couple of points.
Yeah, and I think this is really a final for both these two sides. I think obviously for Cerro Porteño, they want to continue to close the gap as best as they can, and certainly against a top rival like Libertad, they're going to have to do that in this game. Whereas for Libertad, they can take the advantage of separating that gap. I mean, looking at it real quick, Fede, going back to you, who do you feel is best suited for this game? I mean, obviously Cerro's at home in this one, but who do you feel needs to come into this game who is more confident, in your opinion?
Obviously, Cerro Porteño coming after beating Colón, this is going to be a great boost for them. But I do think that Libertad is the big favorite. I do think they're playing the best football right now, even better than Cerro Porteño. Cerro needs their starting 11. If they mix up a couple of players, they're not going to get the same performance. I do think we're going to have a packed stadium because this weekend, just like I was saying, it's Semana Santa, Holy Week. A lot of people are off. A lot of people are going to be traveling. They're going to be available to come to Asuncion, and the last result against Colón is going to push the Cerro Porteño fans into trying to get back into this local league. But I think Libertad is getting closer and closer to taking it. So yeah, just take your Easter eggs to the stadium because it's going to be played on Sunday when we have Easter around. And lately, Libertad has been beating Cerro Porteño in their stadium. Cerro hasn't gotten good results against this team, particularly in La Nueva Olla Azulgrana. So we'll see what goes down. But if I had to put my money on one of these two teams, hey, Libertad has just looked sharp in these last games.
Yeah, I'd go with that too, because I mean, Cerro have a slight advantage. They have the extra day rest because they play tonight as we record, which is Tuesday, and Libertad are playing Caracas tomorrow, Wednesday. But like we're saying, with that kind of team, or that squad size that Libertad have, I don't think that's going to be such an issue for them. Cerro, let's see how Beto Espinola comes back. Let's see how tired Claudio Aquino is and Pica Lucena and people. They're going to have to play the same two strikers probably because they don't have anybody else, kind of thing. So yeah, I'm thinking it's going to be maybe a Libertad win or a draw, but I can really see Cerro getting the 3 points, which they would need to close the gap. And talking about the rest of the league, like you said, Roberto, Libertad are 9 points ahead of Resistencia, who are in third place. So I don't think anybody is there can catch them other than Cerro. This is very much, to give it the Premier League example, this is like Liverpool and Man City right now. There's no one else is even close.
Well, hopefully it could be just as entertaining as we saw on Sunday. Obviously, the 2-2 draw there was really a good game. So hopefully between these two sides, it's going to be tough. I mean, obviously, you would think that with Cerro being at home, it gives them the advantage, especially coming after that win over Colón. But that doesn't say that Libertad are still, I think, a side that are full in depth. I think they've had Cerro's number in the last few games, like Fede has mentioned. So this is really going to be an interesting matchup. I think this could indeed be the showdown that could indeed decide the Apertura in itself. And you know,
It
we're
could
still
be the
early
game
on.
of the tournament, Roberto.
It could definitely. And also as well, you know, this is where all the big kids have to shine. This is where the likes of, you got two youngsters playing against each other. You got Fernando Romero on one end, you know, coming in for the replacement of Morales, who's injured, and now Marcelo Martins Moreno, who is obviously out because of his father's death, and the other new kid on the block in Julio Enciso. So this is going to be an interesting battle between this, and to see if indeed someone can finally stop this kid, like you said, Fed, if these defenses can indeed stop him. But yeah, I hope for a very entertaining game happening at Manuel Oya as we switch gears now to obviously what's going on in the international game. We actually do have some friendlies that are confirmed. The first one is going to be for the Paraguayan national team. They will be traveling back to the United States on August 31st. This was actually confirmed today, a couple hours ago. Well, they will be taking on Mexico. Mexico side that obviously will have a South American in their group in the World Cup against Argentina. But, you know, Fede, going to you on this one, I think it's good to see that. It's good to see that the Paraguay are going to have some matches despite not making it to the World Cup. There have also been some rumors that I'm possibly playing Japan and South Korea, two teams that are also in the World Cup this year in Qatar. So pretty much, you know, despite not making it, it's good experience, hopefully, for Guillermo Barros Schelotto to use these type of players for these matches.
Yeah, we don't know what's going to happen with Schelotto next year. We've said it several times already. We don't know if he's going to keep on going as the coach, but hey, he still has the job. He has the contract, and he needs to keep on working. He needs to keep on seeing players, putting new players on the national team. I do think we're going to see a lot of young players on these friendly games, even though we're going to play against teams that are going to go to the World Cup. I do think it's a great opportunity for those players that usually don't have game time in the national team to get that playing time and to have the opportunity to play these kind of big games, right? I mean, Mexico is going to probably put all their stars because they want to get ready for the World Cup, and those other teams that you mentioned. Also, even though I think, you know, wherever you play in the United States against Mexico, you're going to be an away team. There's going to be a lot of Mexicans in Atlanta. Also, hopefully we do have some Paraguayans going down there, even though lately we're not that much of an attraction. But, you know, it is a once in a lifetime probably opportunity for some of our Paraguayans that live in the United States to go and watch our national team and support it no matter what. Even though we're not going to the World Cup, I'm looking forward to these games for the young players, especially just because these are the games where you need to test out players and see if they have what they need to show in these kind of games to stay in the national team. Because, you know, national team is just like that. It's game by game, and it's also very important for them to show out to the rest of the world and see if we can get these players out of here. I mean, you're talking about Julio Enciso. I don't want. I would say about Robert Morales, who was killing it right before his injury. I mean, I want to see these guys go to Europe. I want to see them make it there and then come back to the national team and bring all the talent. I don't think it's the same for them if they stay here in the local league. And, you know, we're not selling much lately. And that's kind of my concern, that I don't know how many players we're going to have from here to the next process starts for the next World Cup installed in Europe and big teams. I don't think we're going to see that transitioning happening. Maybe just a couple of players that might make it big, but we need to start building something, and changes need to be made. I'm seeing Barros Schelotto in pretty much every match. He's watching so many players. He has his radar open, and he hopefully we see a steady team and we start winning games again. Ralph, we really need that also.
Yeah, we need to get that winning mentality, and it'll be nice to take on Mexico as get to see Tata Martino, of course, coming back. Well, not coming back to Paraguay, but being there with the Paraguayan crowd. Is actually a rematch of a game we played 2016 in Atlanta. So we lost 1-0 to Mexico. So hopefully get some revenge there. 27th game in the US that Paraguay have ever played there. So that's pretty cool. we're starting to see more and more games, because for a long time I think Paraguay didn't really come up here. I booked my flights today. I'll be there. Definitely want to check them out. So relatively close to me here. And yeah, I think it's a game where we'll see by August, we will have seen, let's hopefully, that's when the leagues in Europe have started. So hopefully we've seen some of those players move, like you were saying, Julio and Ciso, but maybe there's a couple of others will have found their way into Europe. And let's see also, I guess we'll get to see some of these players, these younger players that are coming through and starting to find their feet in the local league, that might be very young and usually considered for, say, like an Olympic team or under 20s, but give them the chance now, because that's what we're building towards. We're building towards 2026. So I'm thinking, like off the top of my head, like someone like Mati Segovia at Guarani. He's the current under 20s captain of the Paraguayan national team. So get him into the main team, and see what he can do and step it up a level. But yeah, excited that we get to play these matches and start to think towards the future after what's been like a kind of depressing couple of years, watching us slowly fade away, our hopes fade away. Now we have to renew that hope, right?
Yes, we definitely have to renew that hope, and hopefully we can see a good impression from these players heading into these friendlies as we close on to another episode of Guarani Vision. Thank you to everyone listening in and subscribing. So for myself, Roberto Rojas, Fede Perez, and Ralph Hannah, thank you so much for listening in. See you soon.